Best team. But yeah, it was pretty good. And that's average.
Is it? Yeah. I guess they really.
So the plan had been to C-section that show. Yeah. One we can stop by, so.
That's all we've got to do is.
Like, or it was the. That was the earliest left on some shop. Also, she did this one. She went.
I know we don't, but that's like we're live. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Overview Scrutiny Services. I'm Carol Coburn. I chair this committee, and Philip Townsend on my left is my vice chair. So let's move straight on to the agenda. Apologies for absence and substitution, please, Kim.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Austin and Councillor Hess.
But with no substitutions.
With no
I know
substitutions.
Councillor Austin was very late.
Yes,
Presumably got Councillor Hess.
Councillor Hess has a cold.
Right.
They told us today.
Yes, no, if they're ill, I don't really want them at the committee. I don't mean to be rude, but I think they're better at home. Minutes of the last meeting, they've been published on the council's website. Is everyone quite happy that we can sign those minutes as a correct record? Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest before the meeting?
None submitted before the meeting.
Anyone wish to declare any interest at the meeting? No. We'll move straight on to questions from members of the public. There are two questions from members of the public. And we have neither of them with us, I don't think, not even online. Oh, before I do that, I've just do what I've just been asked. Councillor White. Councillor White, you are with us, and Kim has just reminded me that you may take part in the discussion, but obviously if we come to any decision making, you can't participate in that. I don't think it will happen, but just to remind you of the rules as you're not with us.
That's left me very disappointed. But
well, you can talk.
Thank you.
It's just the decision making. So can we move on then to the questions? Am I right in thinking we have neither question here?
No, we haven't, Chair.
Or online. So the first question, do I need to read them all out? The question and the answer?
Could you read out Mr. House's, because he did ask for that to be.
Right. So the first question was from Mr. Tim House, who asks, what formal and informal powers does this committee have to scrutinise or direct the scrutiny of the performance of executive heads, their departments or their officers, if committee members become concerned that decisions are being taken by a head, their department or their officers for political or other inappropriate reasons and are not in line with the legitimate expectations of councillors and or residents? Do the committee members currently have any such concerns relating to their any executive head, their department or their officers? And we have a response from the monitoring officer. Do I need to read that as well, Kim?
Yes, please.
So the response from the monitoring officer to Mr. House's question, all officers...
Try.
Musical accompaniment to the response. Right. All officers below chief executive are responsible to the head of paid services rather than to councillors. The head of paid service has not raised any concerns with the chair of the ONS committee about lack of political impartiality of any senior officers. As part of the scrutiny function, the council's constitution allows for the chair of the ONS committee to call any senior officer to the committee to explain their performance in respect of any matter within their remit. The chair of ONS has not felt the need to do so in this case. Should anyone have any concerns about the conduct or performance of any senior officer within the council, they should address their concerns to the head of paid service through the usual complaint procedure via the website. And we have a second question from the South Farnham Residents Association, together with Badshot Lee Community Association. They've submitted 2 questions to the committee. And a response has been prepared by the Executive Head of Planning Development, which will be sent to the questioner by the scrutiny officer. And is that all we can say at the moment?
Yes, my understanding is questions are there after quite a long preamble. I don't know if the executive head wants to run through the answers briefly, or if any members have any interest in the questions. I mean, that's to your discretion.
Right, sorry, I'm leaping ahead. Let's give you the, after all that preamble, which you could read at your own time. The 2 questions were quite simply, when is the first opportunity for recognised residents associations to get involved? This is obviously to do with the local plan and also with for the site, anything to do with planning and the statement of community involvement. When is the first opportunity for recognised residents associations to get involved, and how can officers help us achieve that? And the second question, how can recognised residents associations achieve the earliest engagement with officers and developers prior to the application being logged, particularly for reserved matters applications? So as I said, there will be a written response sent to the chairman of SOFRA, the South Farnham Residents Association, and I take it that the chair will have a chance to come back if they're not pleased with the response. I have to say, I think some of this will come up anyway when we look at the statement of community involvement. So I think we hopefully might even address some of the doubts that she has. Right, is that all the questions we have at the moment that are general questions, Jake?
Yes, that's everything from members of the public.
The rest will come under different headings. Yes. Yeah. Right, so moving on, do we have any questions from members? Item 5.
Well, we have we discussed the questions that we printed in the supplement, but all of which come really under the later item
Yes,
statements of community
We
involvement.
don't have
So,
general questions.
no, non-general, no.
Right, so let's move on then. Are there any questions from members? So moving on then to item 6, which is the committee forward work programme. It's on page 13. Everything at the moment, if you look at the executive forward programme, is of course related to budgets, and it's all the budgets and housing and all the other things have to be done. So ours is not, I'm moving straight on to page 16 because no point looking back at the history. But, you know, we have the upcoming items listed there. You can see what we have tonight: statement of community involvement, revised MPPF, and the economic development strategy. I've asked for an update, a verbal update on the Safer Waverley Partnership, and we do have some questions on that people have sent in, which will be very interesting. And the homelessness prevention strategy. Again, these are for the future. We don't have a date for that. And the annual air quality status, which Councillor Hyman raised and said, you know, we haven't looked at that for some time. So those are the things that we have at the moment as upcoming items. Councillor Munro raised the question of the Surrey Environment Partnership. I raised this, or you raised it with me, with the previous head of service, who has since departed, and he suggested that the next head of service might take this forward. We have, as far as I know, an interim head at the moment. So whether or not that will still go even further back, I don't know. Certainly, I've been in contact with the interim, who was very, very good, answered my questions sort of promptly. But whether or not, how long is an interim is really what I'm basically saying. I don't know how long he'll be here, and obviously he's got to run the service. So the Surrey Environment Partnership, this is obviously how we approach waste as a partnership, and Councillor Munro very much wanted to look at it from Waverley's point of view. Don't know whether any of the officers have got any comment on that.
Katie has that.
Oh, Katie.
Sorry, just want to clarify, yeah, that on March the 26th, we'll be bringing the full scrutiny of the SWP partnership proposed plan and annual report. I see we've got a verbal to say, but there will be a full scrutiny on March 26th. I see it on your forward plan, but just to definitely confirm that is happening.
Oh, that's great, Katie, and you'll be, yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll
You'll
bring
be here to answer the questions that we've already set in, yeah?
Yeah, but then we'll have the executive, the sort of responsible officers from the other organisations come to that scrutiny one, because obviously we can't completely answer for them. So that on March 26th will be the full scrutiny of the good partnership.
But we can put these questions to you tonight, and you can either tell us.
Yeah. But there'll be further detail in March as well, so it will give you a much more rounded view then.
Thank you. I was very keen that this committee, the new members, got to know what the Safer Way is all about, because obviously those of us who've been here some time know about it. But you know, it is so important, so right, that's lovely, very helpful. Any other suggestions for forward? I mean, for heaven's sake, just send them in. Nothing, as long as it's related, obviously, to our services. As I say, the problem at the moment is that it's all budget, money, and the one thing this committee, doesn't look into at all, do it need money, and housing now it's been taken away. So we are looking at services, and anything to do with services that you think would be useful within this committee, by all means, just let Jake know, and we'll get it put onto the forward work programme. Moving on then, if nobody has any comments or suggestions at the moment, feel free to chip in. We're moving on to item 7, which is just to note that I sent out a request for a nomination to sit on this Driving Monitors Commission Fund. Thank you to those who replied, either to suggest themselves or to back previous suggestions, and basically Councillor David Munro rose to the top. And we're here just to ratify that. So unless anybody, do you want to?
I just wanted to, I said I didn't mind if I did do it, but I also didn't mind if I didn't. So if I'm,
Too late now.
if I'm inadvertently
No.
elbowing somebody
Modest.
else's side, I'm
No,
very
Councillor
sorry about
Munro, I
that.
think it'd be ideal. Farmer councillors or the Granby councillors, I mean, anybody who was too close would have ruled themselves out anyway. You are perfect, right? You're neither of those, and you're experienced councillor, so I'm sure you'll do the job very well. So is all that agreed by the committee?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Quite happy, good. So brings us back to the Safer Waverley Partnership. Do you wish to say anything other than what you've said, Katie, before we look at the questions?
I think Sam was just going to introduce it a bit as well, so I was going to leave that to Sam.
Oh, right. Okay, then, Sam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the questions. Just to reiterate for the panel and to kind of, for those, as you've said, Chair, about Safer Waverley Partnership, it's very important for everyone to come to this understanding that it is indeed a partnership. And although we are the council in that partnership, a lot of the decisions and a lot of the actions are not within our gift. So we are about liaising with the partners to ensure that they understand what councillors want, what communities want, but a lot of it will come down to what their data says, particularly in terms of the police, what their data says and what their resources will allow. So sometimes what we say can be quite disappointing, as you can imagine. But I just wanted to reassure councillors that that is not our making or our desire. We want to do as much as we possibly can, but because it is a partnership, a lot of that is in our gift. So as Katie said, in March, those partners will be here to be able to talk to you about what you want to know as well, so that you hear it from them firsthand. And it's very important to us that we have those partners here to re-emphasise the nature of the partnership. So if that's all right, Joe, I just wanted to give that background before Katie sort of goes into the specific questions.
Yes, no, that's very helpful. And I can remember years back, we used to have everybody in the council chamber for, representatives. And it was a huge meeting, if you remember. It went on goodness knows how long. But, you were very much face to face with, as you say, People had the time to come then
That's
from
right,
all the
yeah.
services, and it was a very, very long but very useful meeting.
Yes.
So, given the restrictions then, have you had time to read the questions, Katie? Were you sent the questions from Councillor Monroe?
Yes, I have, and I've got some answers for you, and I can sort of tidy them up and provide, you know, if you want them on email as well, I can provide them afterwards as well. So I can sort of rattle through them if you
Yeah.
like.
First one
So-
was on domestic homicide reviews.
Yeah. So actually, for first time, we are now not the highest and disproportionately highest, and I think kind of we're now middling in the road. There are some that are in double figures. So that is positive news for us. What I would say is the DHR that we're doing at the moment, actually the death happened in 2020, so it was some years ago, but it took a while to come through to us because of the nature of the death, and it came through a different format, and it's actually a joint safeguarding adult review and domestic homicide review, which a lot of them are tending to follow that pattern now to be joint with Surrey Adult Safeguarding Board. Yes, the fund has the initiative that Councillor Monroe mentioned has been set up, and actually now borough districts, all 11 borough districts, contribute 5,000 towards that per year, and also there's considerable contributions from health, from the PCC, Police Crime Commissioner, and from Surrey Adult Safeguarding Board. So there is a resource that we can use when we get a domestic homicide review, and they will then, that resource will pay for the chair and the administration. The one issue is that resource only happened after we got number 8, so we're yet to benefit from it, which is a shame. Waverley, actually, Waverley Borough Council as a whole has not funded a complete review. The funding has come from our partnership funds, from the police crime, the PCC, Police Crime Commissioner, and what has been in the past, it's more been that it's been admin has been resourced through our communities team. So, you know, actually as a council, it's not costs the council any money, but obviously every partner does have to contribute. So this is a good resource to have, and well, we don't want another domestic homicide review, but if we were to get one, that would then be funded through this new arrangement. It started about November time last year. 22.
Right, someone wants to come in, and then we'll let Councillor Monroe come back if he wants.
Yeah.
Thanks, Katie. I'm just going to add to what Katie says, that absolutely right around these facts. The biggest thing for the DHRs as well is the learning that comes out of it, and how that influences many of our future approaches and policies and projects. Now, I think it would be fair to say, and Katie is free to tell me to shut up, but I actually think that a lot of the DHR reviews come from gaps in adult social care, safeguarding, and again, not criticising our partners, but just acknowledging the huge pressure that they're under. Also, the way in which domestic violence generally is handled, and how the perpetrator is viewed in comparison to the victim, whether we need to be a bit more astute to how a victim will present, even if they are acting in a difficult manner. All of those sorts of things are what we learn, and very little is in the hand of our officers, but it's very important that we don't ignore what comes out of that. And again, that's that partnership learning. And for anyone who's sat on a DHR, as I'm sure some of you have, it is the most depressing situation in the world, because ultimately when you're looking back at it, you think this could have been avoided. And that's the heartbreaking thing. So when we're sitting on it, we're using it to then inform where we go forward so that it doesn't happen again. So the contributions of the partnership are vital to that happening.
Councillor Monroe, are you
Yeah, I just
satisfied
like
with
to say
the
I'm
answers to
very,
your
very
questions?
pleased with that answer. It not only equalises funding across the piece, which is surely correct, but it means that DHRs have a chance of actually being conducted properly without regard for short-term financial limitations. And it also encourages joint work between the districts. And if it does have to happen again, God forbid, then I think it's on a much more sustainable footing. So that's good.
You also asked a second question, which is very topical at the moment. This was antisocial behaviour by 4x4s and bikes in rural areas. And basically, what is the Safer Waverley Partnership doing to address this issue, which is affecting more and more communities as we sit here? Katie, have we got a...
Yeah, so thank you. So and David Hollingsworth, our new ASB officer, he's been in post since end of October, actually met Councillor Monroe on site today. I think the thing is, and it's why we talk about is the partnership is it a role for the partnership to be facilitating that piece of work, and one of the things is that it is not necessarily the Safer Waverley Partnership. What it is when David Hollingsworth has gone out today is it's a role that potentially as a council we can help facilitate and bring together the key partners who are responsible for those lands. But might not be that it is through the Safer Waverley Partnership, and it's determining where that is and what can be done, and being very realistic about it. I think David, I know David has given some suggestions to Councillor Monroe, and I think he is going to help set up this initial group to see meeting to see if we can sort of make some headway. One of the things that is really important, and we've been saying this over another issue in Cranley, in it's been reported, there's sort of crime in shoplifting in Cranley, is the need to actually report to the police, because the one thing we're finding is that police are wanting that data in order to sort of start action with it if it needs a police resource and police action, with them being so busy. But yeah, there is work that can be done. It's just not necessarily through the partnership, and it's how we do that. But I think we've kind of finding a way forward now.
I think with all these things, David, when he was last with us on screen, David Hollingsworth did say that, that it was important, because there's no question people do get to the stage where they think, oh, what's the point of reporting it? Nothing will happen. But as you say, it's this cumulative reporting that's essential, isn't it? Yeah. Councillor Murray, you should come back.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it is a problem in my ward, which is very rural. It's a problem elsewhere, and not necessarily just in rural areas. But if it's not the Safer Waverley Partnership, then who is it? I mean, somebody needs to do something. The police obviously are central to this, but surely not just the police. It's all agencies, including all of the community, parish councils and town councils. So I really just wanted a clearer statement of who's actually assuming responsibility for this subject, which is incredibly difficult. I mean, really is not easy to catch the small minority of people who use our countryside in a very inappropriate way. And I'd just like to see someone stepping up to the plate.
Could you answer that, Katie, or do we have to wait for March the 26th?
I think it's a discussion, particularly for March 28th. But what I would say is, you could say, is it the landowner who is also equally responsible for bringing parties together? I think sorry, can I finish? I think what we have to, is it a borough council responsibility or partnership responsibility? It's debatable. It's whether it's a landowner responsibility. I think what is key is when there is an issue, that there is communication and that it can be brought together through some mechanisms, but it's not necessarily a Safer Waverley Partnership. I can't talk for the police, and that's why I think this issue would need wider debate in March, because I think you would then have those relevant stakeholders at the table who could answer that question for you, David.
Right, thank you, Katie. We fully understand that. David, will that keep you going till March?
Well, just yes, I'm a bit disappointed by the answer, to be honest, Katie. I've known Katie for a very long time, I can say this. I'm glad that the emphasis on reporting is still there. It's so easy not to report. You say, well, what's the use? But it is absolutely essential. And also, I understand that the online way of reporting antisocial behaviour is not as slick as it could be. And when I was talking to David Hollingsworth this morning, that's something he brought up, and I understand he is having a look at that, so that can happen as well. But I just sort of again, I'll finish now. But can we have some action, please, on this scourge?
Chair, could I just say?
Sorry, can we just come back to Katie, then I'll take you, Graham.
Yes.
So Councillor Monroe, I understand there is some action this afternoon following your meeting with David Hollingsworth. And I say it's not necessarily that it's the route of the Safer Waverley Partnership. Action can come in a different form. And I think that action is being taken, and David Hollingsworth is helping lead on that, bring that initial meeting together. At the end of the day, when it comes to enforcement and comes to who's going to enforce, how it's going to be enforced, that's not something that we can make that decision on behalf of another organisation. So that's why we have to bring that meeting together. And even if we brought it together under the Safer Waverley Partnership, it doesn't give the Safer Waverley Partnership can't make people work together. It's that facilitation. So, you know, whilst it's not happening under the partnership, that facilitation is happening and will be as, you know, as good as under the Safer Waverley Partnership. This is what we do as a job all the time in our roles of bringing people together. I think you could ask when we do the scrutiny, you could ask that direct question again to the police. Why aren't they taking that, you know, being responsible for that element? And then they would be in the room to be able to answer that for you. It's just that I'm not able to really answer for another organisation. Just going back to the reporting, we don't, again, have any control over the police reporting of ASB on and on the 101, but we have fed back a number of times on how difficult it is to use that 101 system, including the chat and the call, to the point that the chat line hung up on me in May I think it was last year, and I was then reporting potential modern day slavery, so I was not happy. But we are constantly feeding back that there are difficulties in that reporting mechanism, and I think that's again all we can do. I don't know, Sam, if you've got anything else to add.
No, I agree. I sense Councillor Monroe's frustrations, and I understand that. I think it is about, as Katie rightly says, who is going to enforce it. And once you know who has the power to enforce it, it's then about helping that organisation be accountable.
I think we ought to leave the subject now till March, because I think, you know, I don't think Councillor Monroe's going to let it go. So I think it will be very much a current issue on this thing. Councillor White, do you have something new to say?
Yeah, it just might be helpful, David. About 2 years ago, this precedes me becoming a councillor, there was quite a lot of incidents in Tilford and Frensham of quad bikes and motorbikes, and Jeremy Hunt got involved. Now, unfortunately, I can't remember the detail of that, because I knew that he was going to have a meeting with a representative from the police, and the local residents got involved as well. I mean, as ever, it seems to me that whilst one wouldn't want the local residents tackling these unsociable people, it would be a good idea that they have some sort of reporting system, of course, so that and an agreement with the police. I gather from the police that it's all about Facebook now, that they like communication coming through Facebook. So you know, this is just feeding a bit of information really that might help the discussion.
Right, thank you for that. We'll put that into March. I think we've got quite a lively discussion coming. I'm going to skip over Councillor Austin's question, only because we don't have the indicators here, so we can't see what we're talking about. But Councillor Monroe raised two other issues. One was neighbour dispute action groups, and one was health and wellbeing board. Is that not you, Dave? Anyway, basically, can we have an update on neighbour dispute action groups? Do we have any?
Sorry, can I just say as well, before we continue, the health and wellbeing board was actually a reference in our report, not something Councillor Monroe sent on. So, but yes, the one about neighbour disputes
right.
action
Neighbour
groups.
dispute action groups.
David. Yeah.
We got some, and what are they doing?
Yeah, so I can update that. So this group was actually disbanded in this year by the partnership and the thing is it's not gone, it's still going through that kind of mechanism. It was initially set up because they felt could it be early intervention to get neighbourhood disputes really early. What we found is that it hasn't worked in that way, and actually we've just put that the mechanism back into our charm because it tends to be our community harm risk management victims and perpetrators, and it's gone back into our joint action groups. This was initially, I think, at the request of the borough commander at that time, the NDAG was, but we haven't found, it was not found to be an effective group. But again, that will be reported back, and that's part of the overview report that Eve is currently pulling together, and will come to you in March. But yes, it's it hadn't been as successful as we'd like, but we were trialing it because due to the sort of borough inspector wanted to sort of see if we could look at a different way of early intervention.
Lovely.
It's not really
Right,
done it.
before we let you go, Katie, can you answer about the Health and Wellbeing Board?
I'm going to let Sam answer on that one. 'Cause we are moving forward.
That's by far the best direction.
Yes,
Sam?
thank you, Chair. So yeah, we have established the Joint Health and Wellbeing Board that works within a Thriving Communities framework in partnership with the NHS. And what that means is that we're leading on it, and we have an overall partnership group of a variety of partners that involve NHS colleagues to look at how we can inform projects and deliveries of what our greatest needs are according to the health insights, and that is to promote a longevity of health and wellbeing amongst our communities. So we have a joint board, and then we have two distinct operational groups, one for Waverley, one for Guildford, because there are different needs and different community aspirations, etc. And Katie kindly leads the Waverley operational group. I lead the board, and a colleague in Guildford leads the Guildford operational, and we pull it together. We've had our first partnership board last year. There's been a Waverley operational board as well that has happened, and Guildford's is happening on Thursday. And we can give you a detailed update in March as part of the wider report, if that would help. You might also, Chair, want to just look at that on its own rather than part of community safety, if that would help. As part of the work plan, we can certainly do that.
Yeah, well, I think it's important that we do.
Definitely.
And there's lots of initiatives below the joint board and the
Absolutely.
two joint boards, as it were. There's
Absolutely.
lots of stuff going on.
And
So-
it links into funding, it
Yeah.
links into all of those sorts of ideas. So if you'd like that as a separate work
Yeah.
stream,
Yeah.
that's something we can bring
I think
as part of
that
the work plan.
sounds, does everyone agree with that?
Yeah,
No, it
really.
does sound so it's something we'd be very interested in.
No problem.
You're a gem, Sam. Thank you very
No
much
worries,
indeed.
pleasure.
I think we'll let you go. I think you've earned your crust tonight. Thank you both very much.
Done.
Thank you very much.
So thank you also to Councillor Monroe for.
Yeah, I'm sorry
You
to
know,
have taken up the time. I'm just-
No, it's fascinating. I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it? To look at these issues. And certainly I'm looking forward to March, getting
Yeah.
the full report and, really getting to
Yeah.
grips with the Safer Waverley Partnership. So thank you very
Thank
much
you.
indeed. That's very helpful. Which brings us on to item 9. So, yes, welcome Abby and Catherine. You don't need me to tell you that we have not had long to look at this. And I understand that that's not a cautioning blame, and I'm not trying to make a big thing about it, but I do think we are going to find it very difficult to scrutinise this in depth unless we go through it word by word as a committee, which I have no intention of doing. So I hope we can get a very enlightening. I thought it was fascinating read. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the read. There's rather a lot of it on a Friday night when you've got weekend commitments. But so I don't know who's going to start.
I'll pick up, Chair.
You're
That's
kicking
okay.
off, right? That's
Thank you.
wonderful. Thanks, Bill.
Good evening, everybody. So I just wanted to introduce the item because this has been an absolute huge piece of work which has involved a number of officers, most especially Catherine and Abby, a little bit of input from me, consultants, and a lot of work with our portfolio holder to get this document to the state that you've received it in now. We're really, really proud of the document and the work that's gone into it. This is an evidence-based strategy. And it's a really, really important strategy for this council. And it won't be just delivered by our very small economic development team. It needs a whole one council approach with officers and members really signed up to supporting this delivery. We'll also rely heavily on our town councils, our business improvement districts, and our strategic partners such as the university to help us deliver what is a very ambitious strategy, I hope you'll agree, and an action plan which will be a live movable document as we go through this, and we will still be consulting on the action plan after tonight. I'm sorry it was late getting to you, but this was still being worked on last Thursday, and that's the reason for it being so late. And you're right at the beginning of the process of it going through the cycle. So the team are going to talk you through some of the key things. We've just got about 6 slides, not a lot, and we'll tell you what we're proposing to happen next, and then we're happy to take any questions that you might have. Over to you.
So I was going to start on why we need to update the economic development strategy for Waverley Borough Council. The existing strategy is 2018 to 32. In the last few years, obviously we've had massive changes. We've had Brexit and the consequences there. The borough's lost about 3,000 jobs. We've had the declaration of a climate emergency, and the evidence of that is seen more day by day. We've had the pandemic. And I'm sure you're aware of the impact there for certain businesses that didn't survive and some that have struggled through, and cost of living. We're talking to businesses all the time, and the issues they've got: retention, recruitment. What can we do to support the 8,000 businesses that we have got in the area? We've got quite a high number of businesses that start and then do die compared to our neighbours. So the evidence base that was attached has got all of that information in, obviously quite a lot of information. We'll talk about that a bit more, and correlating with the new local plan that's being worked on. It's important that some of the features feed into that document. So what we did in terms of the evidence that was gathered, so we worked with Economic Growth, and they did lots of quantitative research for us, looking at Office of National Statistics and the NOMIS data, which is updated. They're looking at trends. I mentioned that the loss of businesses because of Brexit and other issues. And we also work with Avison Young. We've been working with the Guildford Economic Development Strategy. So we did a mixture of quantitative data collection and qualitative. So the consultants spoke to key stakeholders, Surrey County Council, their big economic growth team and skills team, the town and parishes, the chambers of commerce. We ran workshops in the different settlements, because one thing to remember is Waverley's not, one homogenous, group. It's different settlements that have different priorities and different needs, as come through in the strategy. And we also did a business survey, and what's on offer in the high streets is really important to why businesses locate in the area. It's a great place to live, and we found that a lot of business owners live in the area. There is also a big gap between how much people earn who live in Waverley and how much people earn who come and work in it. There's about 30% gap. So they're earning a lot less in this area. We want to make sure that there are decent, well-paid jobs and in the area. So we also spoke, very importantly, to colleagues within the council. Businesses might be talking to licensing, they might be talking to do with planning. So how's that coming across? The asset plans for the council are very important, and what influence can we have internally to support the local economy. Externally, as I mentioned, we spoke to business support organisations, so Federation of Small Businesses, National Farmers Union, Visit Surrey, skills providers. We also work with the job clubs across the 4 settlements, but primarily in Farnham and Cranley are the most active at the moment. Interviews with all the broadband providers, there's obviously a lot going on there, and the Surrey digital team, and in the emerging bids, as we mentioned to you now, have all gone over the line. So 3 settlements, we've got business improvement districts, which would be really positive moving forward. I'll pass over to Abby of what the evidence found.
Right, Lisa's too. Yeah, so I mean, I won't read the slides verbatim, but you know, hopefully you have picked up what the key vision is ultimately within the document, and that's talking about stimulating or thriving in green local economy, and that's certainly kind of the title of the document ultimately. And I think within the vision, we're trying to recognise that whilst we're looking to achieve economic prosperity, it's not at any cost. Rather, it needs to be balanced against the priorities and pressures that we know that exist on our environment, and ensuring that it delivers inclusive inclusive growth that benefits all. I think also, as Catherine's touched on already, what the vision tries to touch on is the fact that this strategy can't be delivered just by the economic development team, but actually it's a kind of one council approach to our interface with business and supporting them to achieve either starting up, scaling up, or locating in the borough. And similarly, that our partners are equally critical in actually delivering the strategy. We can't do it alone, and very much we need their buy-in to achieve this. I think also the strategy recognises that there's a lot of latent potential, I think, within certain sectors. If we talked about kind of the green economy in the first instance, and then similarly the strategy touches on the creative industries, createch, as being kind of another key strand that we could do more ultimately to support, and that could certainly deliver kind of growth in the borough. I think also critically, the strategy, as we've touched on, is hopefully ambitious, and you can reflect that, and it's about doing things differently, not ultimately repeating the same things to get the same approach. So with that being said, the strategy is structured around 6 themes: turbocharging our small business economy, so that's supporting our businesses, existing businesses, to prosper and attract small businesses and startups to the borough; harnessing the green economy revolution, so that's mitigating the environmental impacts of our existing businesses and stimulating the growth of our low carbon economy. I think that ties in very much to the climate kind of declaration that this authority made a number of years ago. Refining our high streets, I think that's really about recognising that there has been a significant shift in the way that our high streets operate, how retail is kind of now presenting itself, and how people are interfacing with that, and really helping our centres, which, as Catherine's touched on, all are individually unique in their own right, but helping them to evolve ultimately and become resilient in the face of that change that they're experience. Improving our commercial space of, ultimately that's about trying to reverse decrease in commercial floor space that we know we've seen, as have other authorities, and trying to enhance that to attract different businesses into the borough, so more sustainable, modern, productive businesses, or ultimately provide that space that's critical for those existing businesses to kind of scale up within the borough. In terms of valuing, we've talked already about how this strategy seeks to kind of deliver inclusive economic development, and that's about ensuring our residents can benefit from this, and supporting the sectors that underpin the day-to-day needs of the borough. So that's the kind of foundational economy. And then finally, around enhancing our physical and digital infrastructure. I think it's kind of very well known that there are significant pockets within the borough which suffer from poor internet connectivity in particular, but there are other constraints in the borough at the moment around highway road infrastructure, and what can we do to try and encourage more sustainable modes of transport, and which may ultimately help to address that. So leading on from that, then there are 6 corresponding game changers which sit under those different Thrive themes. They're on the screen. I won't talk through them, but underneath each of those, critically, there's an action plan, and that draws out short, medium, and long-term actions that we and partners can look to deliver to achieve kind of the overarching vision. Recognising ultimately that the strategy spans a 10-year horizon. So, some things are probably easier to achieve, and we're possibly already doing a number of those that are helpful, but actually to achieve kind of long-term place shaping activity that will take a considerable amount of time. And really just then touching in terms of, I guess, how do we move forward from today and from strategy into delivery? As I've touched on, engagement from partners and buy-in to this strategy and action plan is absolutely critical. So rather than kind of moving straight ahead to get this, move this strategy through to adoption, actually our approach is very much that we want to engage sense check with partners who've already fed into this strategy to get their feedback. before then bring it forward to executive and onto council for adoption. Critically, there's very much a role for us to embed the strategy and the vision and the way that we want the organisation, I suppose, to kind of view economic development amongst both councillors and also staff. So that's, you know, we've already touched on the number of services that have very much a business-facing interface. So that's very much a key thing that we're focusing on now. And then you will have picked up the action plan. It's a live document, but there are 41, I think, 47. Oh, I knew it was 1 or 7. 47 actions within it, and there's a need really to look to prioritise that with our partners around where our focus is initially. And crucially, with that, then you know, there are opportunities, I think, for us to look at external funding. So we've often looked about in terms of kind of capital projects, is there a funding available from Homes England around the Brownfield Land Release Fund that can help bring some of these schemes forward? Or is there other kind of more revenue-based funding, such as that which we've secured through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, that can also help to deliver this? So I guess it's a kind of evolution, and this is really the first step today to kind of getting feedback from this committee before we move forward in that trajectory.
Thank you very much indeed. First thing I wrote down was congratulations when I saw the acronym for Thrive. Having delivered it, very disappointed you couldn't come up for one for the creative fund, whatever. But I'm sure you can work on it. Greenwich doesn't really have much of it, does it? But anyway, as I say, we won't have had a great deal of time.
Yeah.
I know some of us have read both all the documents. Some of us have read some of it, and I've concentrated on the action plan. Can we ask some questions first of all of the officers, and then come round to some comments? Right. So I don't know those folks. So yes,
I've got one question and one comment. Shall I do them both?
yeah, do them both.
So thank you very much. I think this is an absolutely excellent document. I mean, I am admittedly a great supporter of zone-up economics. And I think this draft is really refreshing and inspirational after years of frugality and compounded by Brexit and pandemics and goodness and cost of living, goodness knows what else. So this, I feel, is very, very refreshing. Thank you. I've got a question at 5.1. And I just wonder, and I'm no expert at all on rubbish, but apart from maybe when I speak it, but just this bit about reviewing the council's waste contract to explore opportunities to reduce emissions. Is that going to include recycling? Because I often come across people who say, oh, well, they're cynical, frankly, about recycling. And I think there's an awful lot of work that we all need to do on recycling. Not least because it seems to vary, you know, across the even just the county or maybe even the borough. I don't know, but there's a lot to do on recycling, I think, and I just wondered if that's going to be included in that that part. And if you don't know, that's fine. Tell me later. Something.
Sorry, is that from the action plan?
No, it's strategy.
I beg your pardon. Yeah, 5.1. Focus on Waverley Borough's council sustainability investments.
I think that comes back to, you know, the buy-in from heads of service to make sure that they're aware of kind of the overarching priorities that we've got here. I think that's a conversation that we really need to pick up with the head of service and director. But I think that it's timely insofar as the review of our waste contracts is fairly imminent, as I understand it. So,
and it fits in very well with the environment partnership that we were sort of talking about earlier. So we'll be all about these things.
Can I just have my comment? Just very quickly?
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. And then just really quickly, in section 8 on the strategy, it's really just a comment, and it's about public transport. And I know an awful lot of this, as we've said before, isn't in our gift necessarily to, you know, actually execute. But I do think it's when we're trying to increase employment and opportunities and all these things that this document says, it's really annoying that we can't actually go from Farnham to Godalming or Farnham to Cranley or Godalming to Cranley by public transport without having to go all over the blooming place. And it would just be so wonderful if people could live in Farnham and have a job in Cranley or vice versa without having to go all over somebody or other's half acre.
I think it would just nod to that rather than
Comment.
We can lobby.
You know, we all need to, and that includes the sustainable transport group, doesn't it?
Yeah. So Councillor Keane.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just really, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you. It's an immense amount of work and it's really, really good. But there's one thing that I'd like to touch on, and that when you're talking about commercial space, I think the one thing that I find quite worrying about this is the fact that I can think of several commercial spaces that have been lost to housing. They're sold and a developer comes in or somebody decides to build a house, and we are losing so much commercial space in our areas that people really want, and it's just such a pity. So it's just a comment really that I am concerned about.
I'll take Councillor Hyman because he's put his name down to speak on this item. Councillor Hyman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can indeed. Good evening. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I have been through all of this. I must admit I haven't memorised all of the appendices and the rest of it. It's there's quite a lot of it, but a lot of work gone into it, and thank the officers very much. Lots of information, well written as well, and very interesting. But I do think it's far too bulky for the limited remit that we have in economic development ourselves. Because obviously if we produce these strategies and documents, then people, developers, they have to pay somebody to read them and advise them on them, or they have to do it themselves, which most of them certainly wouldn't want to get into it, and certainly wouldn't want to get into the background and the evidence base upon which our strategies depend. So, but there are some issues here, particularly with it. In terms of really just looking at admin, in section 7.5, I think it's page 100 page 60 of the EGM consultants EDS reports evidence base, it says that this EDS, the Economic Development Scheme strategy, must align with the local plan. Well, the timing of this doesn't do so. It doesn't go through to 2043, does it? As the local plan will. So I'm wondering whether we've got to do something about that. I know it's almost a living document, certainly for a start, has to be by nature, because there are lots of changes, and the government are coming up with all sorts of things, particularly in changes to the way local plans are prepared. So we're not going necessarily, we don't know exactly what we're going to have to do with this in a couple of years' time when the government gets around to doing its planning changes and that sort of thing. There are some issues with this, because I think as the amount that we can do ourselves, it seems to be concentrate on us being an exemplar, leading nationally by the sound of it, certainly in the southeast, on retrofitting to passive house standards of our own housing, and yes, we intend to be an exemplar there in the retrofitting skills, but we can't afford to do it widely, and I don't know whether we can really afford to employ the staff we need to be able to advise everybody else on how to do it. It might be a good business to do, but if no one can actually afford to do it without government funding, and who are we going to get any money out of if there's no funding from the government to go forwards? We're doing it ourselves without the air source heat pumps and underfloor heating that you'd expect in exemplar schemes where we've got our own the trial going on at Oxford Ridge F, isn't it? I think it's on. Also, the HRA property development strategies that we got at the moment are a very big part of this. But like I think members are aware that I've criticised that it's costing us £700,000 a home build cost plus land costs over.
Can I just bring you back to the strategy, Councillor Hyman, because
well, I'm saying this is the main part. Having read through it and looked for where it is, Chairman. I'm saying that we have got difficulties, but you'll yourself, I'm sure, also agree that we've got particular issues here with the fact that it's self-conflicting in numerous ways. Particularly with regard to Farnham's, if Farnham's going to be accessible in the future, and if Farnham's going to be a hub for economic development, and this strategy very much says it is, that we're sort of leading in Farnham. We've got two different things in there. If you look at page 32, agenda page 50, it says at paragraph 9.4, other actions are to work positively with Surrey County Council and National Highways, and I'm quoting here, to identify and bring forward new highway schemes that reduce congestion, create attractive landscapes and improve travel reliability across the borough. So that's on the one hand. And on page 36, it says 6.3.1, the Farnham Place strategy. We work with Surrey County Council to drive forward priority initiatives identified in the Farnham Infrastructure Programme, most notably major infrastructure investments focused on reducing traffic in the town centre. Now, that's forcing active travel behaviour, behavioural change, by increasing congestion. This says that we're increasing congestion at the and that we're reducing congestion.
I'm going to have to stop you at the moment. You know, you really have had your time. I think one thing about a strategy, if a strategy doesn't aim for the stars, there's not a great deal of point in having a strategy. You know, we can all aim for the gutter and get there, but let's aim for the stars. So I agree with you. A lot of it is not going to happen, but that doesn't mean that the steps on the way to achieving it won't achieve something. We all know about being the enemy of the good. Councillor Rubini, you wanted to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My problem is quite straightforward. I mean, I represent Hazelmere, very hilly area, very difficult to get cycles or pedestrians to come out. We've recently had that experiment where we put a cycle rack in the middle of the car park at Hazelmere. It's very rarely used, and we don't get more than one or two in it. So I've got this contest between the car and the bicycle. I don't know what the answer is, because part of the problem is not only is it hilly and people can't, because Hazelmere itself is in a bowl, so wherever you go to get home, you've got to go upwards. Problem then becomes that if the car comes in, we haven't got a huge amount of parking space, and we don't want to develop more parking space because that stops the cycling. The other problem is with the infrastructure for the cycle. We've got very few cycle routes, and certainly you couldn't cycle into Hazelmere from other areas. For example, from Milford, I would defy anybody to take that route unless you're young, built with crash helmets and goodness knows what else, because it's so dangerous. So young people are not being brought up to automatically ride bicycles. They're being taken to the town centres and then going back usually by car. And public transport in Hazelmere is very poor. Yes, we can go to Godalming, we can probably go south to Midhurst. But somebody mentioned just now, to get to Farnham is a problem. I don't think there's any way we can get to Cranley. And of course, the big transport is the railway station. With the strikes going on, again, it's difficult to use. So what I'd like to know is how you intend to get funding, try and put some of these infrastructure problems, particularly in Hazelmere, how do we correct them?
I think they probably apply across the borough.
I'm sure they do.
And I don't believe you can put a genie back in the bottle, and I will never get on a bike, to my dying day. I have been on a bike, Councillor Munro, before you say something. But I have no intention evermore of getting into one. And I think one has to be realistic, but we'll let the officers come back. I'll take Councillor Munro, and then if the officers want to come back and comment on anything, they're very welcome.
Got a few points. Thank you, Aaron. I searched for a reference to housing, and I couldn't find any. And isn't this quite a glaring omission? Because I've been told that actually one of the factors holding our economic development back is the lack of housing, especially for young people. Now, I know can be a conflict, of course, between providing more housing and keeping the borough we want. I mean, that's the local plan and all the rest of it. And I'm not pretending it's easy, but I do think Waverley ought to have a view on the balance between encouraging more housing, especially affordable housing, and all the other constraints on that. And I was also, and I don't have a solution, I'm here in strictly scrutiny mode. Young people as well. I couldn't see a specific reference to encouraging young people, although I do accept there were glancing references, Waverley Training Services and so on. So maybe that ought to be bumped up a bit. I was, I'm afraid, a bit put off by some of the language, which I felt was a bit clunky. Donut economics did nothing for me, frankly. I had to get over that to the. Can we have a review on that? More at home around me. There's an enormous hole, literally, in just off the centre of Farnham, and it's called the Woolmead. But there's a number of references to other areas throughout the borough, quite rightly, as needing attention. Could we add Woolmead to the list, please? And I know it's got a history, and it's not easy, but we really shouldn't accept that blight is there for forever. So can we try and do something about it through this means? Now, sort of coming to the end, I was in a very interesting working group on sustainable transport. So we had a meeting, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and we had a very useful presentation by the commercial director of Stagecoach Bus Company. And he said, and I've heard it before, the single thing that he would like to encourage bus travel is to remove the congestion pinch points. If he could reassure the potential bus travelling public that they'd actually get on a bus on time and leave the bus on time, that would so much increase demand. And he gave us a list of 10 major pinch points in Waverley, none of which I can remember, but they were all obvious ones. So can we put that in the action plan, working with partners actually to try and remove these? Clearly highways plays a crucial part. No money. It does say right up front there isn't any money. And then it leads to all these suggestions for spending money. And again, I accept that. But in our budget briefing, which was it 2 weeks ago?
I'm not allowed to speak.
I thought that there was a fund there, which was it called Invest to Save or something? People coming up with bright ideas to spend a bit of money, to save a bit of money. And I hope the economic development team is right there at the front of the queue to get some money out of Councillor Merryweather for this very, very, very worthy area. So that's me.
Right, I've got Councillor Budley wants to speak, and then perhaps the officers would like to come back. I've got a few points, but I'll wait for you. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much. Clearly a very detailed and thorough set of documents, and really quite exciting forward-thinking initiatives in there. So yeah, I think it's excellent. The only thing I wanted to mention, and in relation to the rural economy in particular, and apologies if I've missed it, but whether there should be a section in there about the importance and value of existing amenities. So thinking like village shops and pharmacies that rural communities heavily rely on, and that in many cases are under threat, and how we can further support them specifically and help them thrive and survive. So I think there's plenty in there that sort of will help those sorts of businesses, but just whether that should be more of a sort of clear ambition, and whether it should be pulled out into a separate sort of aim and objective to support those specific businesses, rather than, there's a lot about supporting businesses in the rural economy, but no sort of detail as to what is really needed and needs to be preserved.
Now, do any of the officers want to come back?
I shall start.
Yeah.
So thank you, some great comments there. And I think we might have some answers to some of the questions, but I think we'll take away all your comments and think about how we might weave them in or pull them out a little bit more if they're not obvious enough. There was a question about Hazelmere car versus bicycle and how we will get funding. You know, I think what I'd say is that this strategy is very wide ranging and covers a whole load of things that the council are doing or involved in. And we've tried to pull those things together in this one document so we don't lose sight of them. And again, that we have that one council approach to trying to deliver this really ambitious policy and strategy. So the great thing about having this is it will enable us to be on the front foot when we want to make funding bids, because having a really clear economic development strategy that your partners have signed up to and support is really valuable when you're bidding. So it'd be a really helpful document. I think quite a few of the comments and questions related to planning, and Claire might want to speak in a second just on that. And you know, I think this strategy to me is very important, and is really important to the local plan as well in many respects. And I think that we can't deal with everything here on, otherwise this will be thousands of pages long, this strategy. But what we might be able to do is reference a bit more where these things are picked up elsewhere, such as in the local plan. So we can look at that. I think the reference to housing is really important, and I think it is picked up in the strategy quite strongly, I think. And it's a big problem for us in Waverley that people can't afford to live here, and that's a real issue with the foundation economy, where people who want to work in care and retail and leisure who are on minimum or wage just can't afford to live here unless they live with their parents. So it is a big issue for Surrey more generally, but especially here as well. I think comment about donut economics, that's a really, really well-known economic model. We can't change the name of it. It's, I think Councillor Townsend's actually got a book on it because it's the building. It is a really, really well-known model, and then anybody who works in economic development, but perhaps we could give a big explanation about what it means in the document. I was thinking of that. Woolmead, I can talk to you separately about that because I'm doing some work. No, I'm doing some work on Woolmead, so I can talk to you about that separately. And then on sustainable transport, again, that's another one of those issues which is very wide-ranging and overlaps with our climate emergency and our climate change plan, which has its own massive action plan, which is, got a lot of stuff in there that's not funded. So again, maybe we can just point a little bit better to that. The Investor Save budget, we certainly will be looking at that for any projects that will deliver savings through investment. And we won't be ignoring that. And the rural economy, it's a massive, important economy for us. And I think the point about protecting the amenities is probably more of a local plan and a planning policy issue, but we can take advice on that. Abby, anything you want to add on any of that?
I think you've covered most of it. The only thing I was just going to quickly touch on was around the kind of 10-year time horizon. So I appreciate kind of the comment that Councillor Hyman's made in relation to some kind of correlation with the local plan. I think clearly, who knows what the economy will look like in 10 years' time, and I think to try and forecast that would be incredibly challenging and perhaps ill-conceived. So I think really the time horizon we've got for the strategy would be correct, and recognising that it is a live document that we're reviewing, and indeed, when we get to 9-10 years, I suspect we will probably look to update it again and introduce a new one that reflects the relevant time. And as Dawn said, I think the only other final thing I'd just say is the document tries to cover a lot of ground but not duplicate. So I'm hearing very clearly about concerns around the infrastructure, which is a very well-known issue, particularly amongst my planning policy team. But I think there are supporting documents, the infrastructure delivery plan, the LC whips that sit underneath that like cycle walking infrastructure plans that are very much in development. So I think there's an opportunity to continue to formulate those as we move forward. And I know we've talked regularly about the local plan, plan.
Catherine, or was you?
I was only going to say on sustainable transport, something we tried before Christmas was supporting the hopper service and encouraging families to use it rather than just older people. So that worked really well. So there are things like that we've started that we can continue. And also on the rural economy, the Rural Prosperity Fund, we're focusing on rural businesses. And I know Tess Valley have come to us for advice on how we can support in bigger shops and things like that. So perhaps it's not visible in it, but certainly we are looking at those areas.
Can I just make 1 or 2 points? Sort of dating back a little bit to when we wrote the FCAP document, the Farm and Conservation Area Management Plan, the group that I chaired and worked with Sarah Wells. And interesting listening to all the points, because that was made or adopted in 2010, and all the issues are the same. We had developers in, and they told us then that there was not suitable land for economic development. And we had given permission, and this is where planning comes in, for the Coxbridge sort of business park, I think we called it. And we were very strict on what we said about the heights of the buildings and the type of operations that could go in there. And people didn't want necessarily to do that. They wanted to go a bit higher, they wanted to be a bit dirtier in whatever they were doing. So, you know, we thought we were doing the right thing, putting these restrictions on. What we were actually doing was sending these people off to Guildford or Farnborough or anywhere else where they actually had more space. They all said the same about the business accommodation in all the towns, no parking. And that's again why they were going out of the borough or to the rural sites in the borough. I remember going around Pepper Harrow the first time and I was amazed at it. It was a lovely site to work. I thought, you know, I could work here quite happily. Beautiful space, you could park easily, lovely offices. So, you know, this is such a sort of recurring thing. And I do hope at some point, you know, that this strategy does help to get it right. Because, you know, I think we all know what the issues are. And I think we should do something about it. Planning is, you don't unfortunately reduce the price of houses by building them. We know that in Farnham. When they first put the houses in Badshot Lee, everyone said, oh, this is terrible, our house will lose value. No, it didn't. Every single existing house went up in value. You cannot build affordability. You can only provide suitable housing. And we also know that true affordable housing is going to happen on either council-owned land or government-owned land, because as soon as you put a cost in, you've lost it. So just a couple of points from Farnham. You don't mention the new Ashgate Gallery. You mention a creative hub, and the new Ashgate Gallery is one of the real successes. I'm sure you've been there. You know, it's a non-profit making, not exactly a charity institution, whatever, but they work with the Maltings, with the town council. They've actually been pushing the Maltings, believe it or not. The Maltings is bigger, but the new Ashgate do make sure whatever happens that they're involved. They're feisty and they get things done. They're really good. And we were talking about that again way back, having a creative hub, and I sincerely hope we get that going. But whatever we do, it will be the lack of facilities, you know, office space, the lack of parking around the office space. You know, we've got office space with no parking, but nobody's going to want that, and that therefore it will go to housing. I'm sure the Woolmead will take out the retail. I don't know, I have no idea, but if I were them, I would. It will go to housing. Sorry.
I was going to say, British Car Auction site in Farnham, 450 really good accountancy jobs, and they've moved, and that site they're looking to turn that to residential.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're keen across the area.
Yeah, it is. But, you know, I think by now we do know the issues, and, you know, and I wish you every success with this strategy. I really do. And anybody who's got anything else they want to say that comes, I'm sure you'll be. Well, oh, sorry.
Sorry, yes,
Emma.
just slightly coming late to the party, but one of the things that we haven't talked about at all is the broadband infrastructure. And I have asked Catherine some questions, and thank you very much for your answer, really helpful, in relation to how that might benefit the rural economy that I speak for as ward councillor, because we've got significant patches of no service, and with the digital voice switchover coming actually really quite soon, I think it's due for 2025, that's going to become even more of a problem. And I think one of the things that I see happening is quite a big sea change in the way that people live and work compared with even as recently as 2010. And one of the I think it was in the papers for today, was talking about the loss of the Parsons Brinckerhoff WSP site in Godalming. Now, actually, my husband works there, and they took this big site in Guildford. It's empty because in the intervening period, the pandemic has meant that so many people work from home that actually they've got this great big space that isn't being used. So I wonder if that demand for commercial space is going to be kind of slightly less pressured in the coming years, even more than that change has already taken place, but that in its place, the demand for really good, fast broadband is going to be key, because again, people working from home and competing with gaming teenagers and studying remotely and all of these competing forces. So that's...
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the centre of gravity is going to change in a lot of places, including Farnham, because the shops and the far out ones are gradually going to become residential. I mean, there's no question, you can see it happening already, you know. Can I just make one point about broadband? You might love it. As soon as anybody puts a box in Farnham, my focus, they cannot stand the street furniture that goes with it. They want their broadband, but you stick a bright yellow box near my crossroads and by golly, the phone rings, you know?
Yes.
And so, yeah, everything in life's a compromise. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to come back on the commercial
No,
property
no,
issues,
yeah.
because I think that's a big issue, and you raised a question at the beginning. You know, we've lost a lot of stuff to permitted development rights. There is nothing we can do about. It's government legislation to allow conversion. But what we also see is that the demand from businesses has changed. They don't want the big full print plates anymore. They want smaller, much more flexible, easy out terms as their business expands and contracts. So through the update of the local plan, which has just started, we will review the evidence base relating to commercial space and have a better idea of what is required by the market now in this day and age post COVID, when, you know, working practices have changed significantly. And, you know, we were talking just this morning about gaming companies, and, you know, what we know, because we talked to those people, is that their staff want public transport, or they want to be able to cycle to work. They don't drive.
Yeah.
You know, they want to be near a train station or near a good bus route, and parking isn't an issue for them. They might want a few for the senior executives or whatever, the ones that are not so young. But their demands, their needs are totally different from just a generation ago. And all that, this is really good timing for this strategy, because we are about to update our local plan so we can reflect all these changes in both documents. And the great thing about the community development strategy is we can update it whenever we want, which is not so easy with the local plan. So doing this first is actually a good thing, because it's providing a whole load of evidence and data which can be used as well through the local plan update.
I'd like to wrap this up, but I'll ask Claire if she wants to speak, but she's coming into the planning bit anyway, so she can do it in whichever order she likes. But I have to say, I don't know about everybody else, I feel quite confident with you three in charge that we're actually going to have a strategy, and a strategy that works. And I do thank you very much for rushing to get the documentation to us, albeit very late on a Friday evening. You must have worked very hard. But, you know, I think it gives us time to read it and put in, as I say, anything extra. But thank you very, very much indeed for a comprehensive strategy. As you say, a work in progress for the strategy, for the action plan. I'm sure eventually I'll read the evidence base, but I didn't have the strength over the weekend. But, you know, thank you all very much indeed. Claire, do you wish to say anything in that statement? Or do you
No,
wish to...
I think all the points covered. But
Sure.
I think the overarching thing is this is an overarching
Yeah.
document for the council, and different parts of the council will contribute to it. But it's great to be in one place so we can all share.
Thank you very much indeed. That's great. Right, thank you very much, Ross.
I've got several comments there and follow-ups to go off on, but if there were any specific recommendations that anyone wanted to come out of that, I mean, I'm aware of the sort of tenor of the comments and things they can inform, but if anyone wanted to resolve anything in particular, I thought I'd check.
Can you not turn them in? I think we've
No,
just turned them into sort of general comments. It doesn't even say recommendations on the.
No, it
just
doesn't.
sort of tells us what, but I'm sure, I can't believe Kim can't turn them into intelligence.
We'll work it out.
I'm sure she's down there.
Thank you very much indeed. You're very good to leave if you wish. Which takes us on to planning in two ways. And the first is the statement of community involvement. And I take it it's Andrew who's been sitting there patiently. Are you going to speak to this first?
Yes, if that's possible. Good evening. The statement of community involvement is the document setting out how the council will involve communities and other stakeholders in plan making and in development management. It's a statutory document and we're required to review it every 3 years. And the current document was 2019, so time's up and we need to update it. There's no requirement for us to consult on the SCI, but it is, as I say, it's an important document, so we intended to do that for 6 weeks before bringing it back to the executive and the council. So what we're hoping to get from members this evening is any obvious points that we need to change within the document before it goes out for consultation. As has been mentioned earlier, there's a lot of planning reforms working their way through the system. So this document will need to be reviewed in the not too distant future when the new regulations come into play. So, for example, the current document talks about the production of supplementary planning documents. Well, those are going to be scrapped. So there'll be elements like that we will need to change. And in fact, the government has even talked about doing away with the need for an SCI and instead requiring specific project initiation documents on local plans to set out how you're going to engage with people. So one of the key things I'd say about the SCI, which is very much a sort of update of that 2019 document, we haven't gone back to the starting point. It sets out a flexible approach to engagement, which is proportionate to the matters that are being considered and are realistic in terms of the time and resources the council has. And in doing so, it sets out the minimum standards. We make the point in the report that you can always exceed that. And in some instances, in relation to some planning applications, for example, the council would go over and above if necessary. But it's those minimum standards that are important, because that's what the council will be taken to task over if it doesn't do what it says in this statement of community involvement. The contents of the SCI are summarised at 7.4 in your report. It's basically about who we're going to consult and when, how communities can be involved, what methods we'll use, and what the council will do with the comments. And there's a full section that Claire's updated in relation to involving people in relation to development management matters. And in the appendices, we've identified the key consultation groups and the notification arrangements for planning applications. So that's factual material, but it will obviously guide officers in exercising their duties. I'm not intending to go through the document. You have it before you. Very happy to take questions. Catherine from my team is also with us this evening. So if we can help with any questions, we're very happy to. But we're hoping that you'll be happy for this document to go on for consultation before it's finalised.
Does anybody have any questions before we get around to comments or whatever? Councillor Rubini?
The only thing I mean, it's a very good document. Obviously took a lot of work. Thank you very much, because I couldn't fault it. I mean, yes, it's obviously been used before and you've updated it. The only thing is that should we be looking also, not only the people in here, but we don't seem to challenge the developers. A lot of the problems we have in planning is by the developers themselves coming in and then developing land that we don't want them to develop. And I just wondered if there's any opportunity where you could actually have a partnership or a conversation with the developers to see what they would want from us so that we work closer together. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think, Councillor, obviously the local plan is the main vehicle for that. They will come to us and promote their sites, and the council will take a view on which sites are appropriate. I think once you move into the development management process, I think I'll leave Claire to answer that, but obviously the document does say things about pre-application engagement and the like, but I'll leave Claire to pick that up.
Yeah, and reiterate, we offer a very proactive pre-app service, and so we'll work with developers, and there's probably a journey with developers, particularly on the strategic sites, through the local plan process, through to how that then develops through either further master planning work or straight into a planning application. So there is a journey there for developers that are looking to deliver larger sites all the way through the process.
It is the largest sites that we seem to come into contention with them. And I'm not sure how we smooth that journey out. Like Hazelmere and Farnham, we have a lot of confrontation and planning where they come in, we refuse it, they then go to Peel. I don't know.
I guess it's in part whether we're dealing with developers on allocated sites, which would probably have a slightly different relationship with than the speculative developers that come in and pick, pieces of land that aren't allocated in local plans, in which case almost straight away between us, we might be very open with the developer in those conversations. We're probably working through a strategy that will lead us to an appeal. And we will have a slightly different relationship, and then we'll have a even different, further relationship that's different if we're in a situation where we're working with a developer who has a clear strategy to appeal against non-determination and take away that negotiation discussion that you might have in the life of an application, because they're taking away the power of the council to make that decision and be planning inspectorate.
Yes, sorry, Claire, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just thinking, of the ones that have come recently, you're right, Councillor Rubini, we've had some applications that have come in, where the developers have worked with the parish council, where everyone's, accepting of it, that everything's a compromise. And we've had others where, we're at war, and, it's not edifying for anybody to see this. And I think the chairman of South Farnham Residents Association, I think, again, these committed residents associations, and she works so hard, as do other residents associations, I think they feel they want to be part of the process from a positive point of view. They're not trying to stop things, they're trying to get the best on what happens.
Yeah.
So I think, there is something to be said for this, for early engagement being more than a phrase,
Yeah, and I think whilst the statement of community involvement references the engagement during the pre-app process, the vehicle I think that we will want to pick this up in more detail will be around our pre-app service and our our protocol as part of that. So I've been discussing with the portfolio holder some work to revise our current pre-app to make it clearer, but also to give some clear terms of engagement with the developer, how we're going to engage with our community as part of that paid service to work with community groups, etc. at that pre-app stage. Obviously, that is entirely at the discretion of the developer for commercial reasons, because they may feel commercially it's not appropriate or in their interest to engage in that way. But that will be picked up in more detail as we do some further work on the way we're delivering our pre-app service.
Good. Councillor Monroe.
Yeah, I just had 2 points really. One is I couldn't see a reference, but I may have missed it, to the bid districts in the 3 towns. They're surely important statutory consultees, but I may have missed that there. The other thing is I see that we're still statutorily obliged to put adverts in newspapers. Is there any way of wriggling out of that? Because it does seem completely unnecessary in this day, was people take their information online. I don't know a single person who reads the statutory requirements, and you're about to tell me.
Absolutely. I know. First page of attention, Councillor Monroe.
Well, it's a very expensive way of reaching a very small number of people.
But, better to do that and not reach everybody, I would have thought, but then.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually within legislation.
Yeah, I know we can't get out of it.
Yeah, there was some work done on it. I'm going to say it's 8 years ago, it was about that time, to try and change the original act, which was the 1963 act, that required this to happen. But I suspect there may have been lobbying in certain other powerful groups against changing that legislation.
I haven't lobbied.
I suspect it was more the actual newspaper group.
I do lobby, but not on that.
I wasn't looking at you, Carl, when I said that. So that is still in legislation, and so it's not within our gift to depart from that, recognising it does cost money.
Provided we do the absolute minimum that the
We
legislation.
do the minimum that we're legally required to. Obviously, failure to do that would be a major.
I'll take Councillor Hyman now, if you could be concise, Councillor Hyman.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Yes, I don't need to say too much on this, but of course, I think we're all very interested in what our ex-police and crime commissioners think about wriggling around the law. So I'll take that one on board. I think our residents who would this is all about, and consulting with them. I mean, obviously, from time to time they get consultation fatigue, and I know for a long time, I don't know whether it's still true, but the long time, there were complaints that it's just tick box exercises, that we ignore the residents, and so it doesn't make an awful lot of difference. And obviously our aim here has to be to make sure that it does make things better. I can't see in here what the differences are between the 2019 SCI we adopted. Obviously a while ago, but it's is there a track changes document available? So I haven't put the two documents against each other. I haven't had time to do that. I did it with the MPPF, which is the next item, so I know what all the changes the government got up to on that, but I haven't done it with this. So can we please have a track changes document so that we know what the changes are from last time? And if we could perhaps be told exactly what we are doing better with what we've got in front of us, what difference it will make, because I really can't understand that from the officer report that we've got. I mean, it looks good, but I'm not entirely sure what differences there are there, and obviously I don't want to spend any more time on it just trying to find all the changes than anybody else would. Most importantly in this, I think, is that we give our responsibility is to give our towns and villages and residents the protections that are afforded to them, particularly in law. And I'd really want to know, how does this document ensure that we do that? I know that it's going to be disappearing in a couple of good chance it's disappearing, or the need to have it in a couple of years' time, but that doesn't mean that whilst we do still need to do it, that it shouldn't be effective in because people have gone to all the trouble of updating it here. I think, you know, if we've got a limited time span to take advantage of it to make a difference, great, brilliant, and thanks for all the work. But what changes have been made, and can we have a track changes document, and how does this ensure that we are going to be able to give our towns, villages and residents the protections that are there for them, so that it's not just a tick box exercise, and so the residents don't just get ignored. And we're residents too, of course. But thank you very much indeed, Chair.
No, thank you. And yes, I'm sure Andrew can answer some or all of your questions.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hyman. On the track change document, I'll check what we've got. I know that a lot of the changes were just in terms of updating names of groups and bringing things up to date, but there was a certain amount of reordering to try and make it flow better in a more logical way. So I suspect a track changes version is going to look horribly messy. But I'll see what we've got. But I don't. If we don't have one readily accessible, I'd suggest that it's probably not best use of time to do that. But we will endeavour to draw to your attention what changes have been made. One of the changes that I know has definitely been made is in relation to the greater use of digital engagement, and we've talked in there about the commonplace engagement platform which the council has purchased, and that we will be using as a main vehicle for an ongoing conversation about the local plan. So what we're trying to do is not have these set piece engagements once every 18 months with nothing in between, but rather to keep putting out questions and information and seeking feedback on certain things. So hopefully in the next month or so, we're going to be starting some initial engagement around the scope of the plan and asking for feedback about the current vision and objectives and how we can sharpen that up. And things like the economic strategy you've just been talking about, that's an obvious area that we need to be looking at how the various strategies of the council can be embedded in it.
If I could just come in there, one of the big changes compared to last time is the number of neighbourhood plans. You wouldn't expect me to get through a meeting without mentioning them. And, you know, it does worry me because the plans that allocate sites, you know, are in a particularly floating position at the moment. So you've got your call for sites and you've got the list of the neighbourhood plans that are there that, you know, there may be others before this becomes a final document. But one of the things that Claire brought up when everything went pear-shaped at planning meeting was when a planning officer redefined a site that had been defined in the LAR 2020 and then the Farnham SHLAR, because we were doing it from the Farnham FLAR, sorry, from the old SHLAR. But it was all to do with housing land availability assessment, we defined it, Waverley defined it, and then the speculative application would come in, and all of a sudden it was redefined, I should say, as a suitable site, when two bodies had, during their assessment of sites, declared that they were not suitable for development. And this is a problem we have. Now, we've obviously, Farnham allocates sites, Chiddingfold, I think, allocated some sites. I don't know how many others allocate sites, but if they do, then they do need an indicative idea. They need something about the spatial portrait in order to do that. So basically, they do need to be really involved in the consultation, don't they? So that they know what's going on, so that we're not left with any surprises. So I do think the neighbourhood plan groups, whoever they are, whether it's the parish council or whether it's another group, have to be kept very much in the loop all the way through. Otherwise, you know, they are not going to be able to do what they have to do within the time. You mentioned resources earlier. It was you, Andrew, somebody mentioned how few resources. Remember, members are resources as well. And when it comes to consultation, we're quite capable of taking a document somewhere and showing it to people. You know, we don't have to have paid officers to do that. I'll do it for free anytime. You know, just, I think sometimes you talk about the old people, getting to know them. I went out for the neighbourhood plan to see old people and young people. Young people couldn't give a hang either way, but were very nice to me. The old people all said 2032, I won't be here then. So, you know, when you go out and about, you've got to do it because some of the older people are still around, thank goodness, and you know, we're interested. But you do get, you know, all sorts. But I do think it's important that when you reach out, you do it properly, and you're not going to get young people to notice anything. Doesn't matter, you know, you can dress it up, bells and whistles, and put it on all sorts of that's what I'm looking for, media, but they're not going to pick it up. It's not their interest. So you'd have to go straight to them. And it's the same with some of the other disability groups and that. And if you are short of resources, then send counsellors. What are we for? We're quite capable of going out to ask questions. And the only other point that I do think is a challenge is databases. I mean, most people's databases are out of date almost within the first 6 months, aren't they? And if you just rely on old databases to send stuff out, you're going to get nowhere. So databases have to be revised, and we have to ask the towns and parishes, I would have thought, and other organisations to make sure that their database is up to speed, so that if we ask them to get involved in the process, they can then ask all their resident associations, amenity groups, community groups, all these people who are a source of great information, so that they can come. So I think we are in a slightly different world now. I think with neighbourhood planning, people have got used to actually being listened to. You know, it isn't tick box, because we don't have to do it for neighbourhood planning in quite the same way. The statement of community involvement was just a long list of goodness knows how many things we've done to get the people interested. And we still didn't reach, you know, the majority of them, even going around with a banner and sandwich boards and goodness knows what. You know, people don't notice you, and I don't know how some people miss everything. So if we really are serious, as Councillor Hyman says, that this is not a tick box, we've got to go out. And one last thing, for goodness sake, ask sensible questions. You know, don't ask whether your favourite colour is red or blue, and don't give me a square to say neither of these. Because I tried to do a Surrey County Council survey on commonplace, all smiley faces and little pictures in case I couldn't read, which is fine, you know. But then you get to a question, you can't answer it, you know, because there is no answer to that question and no box that says anything else, you know. So do make sure that we don't put people off by putting out surveys that eventually come to a halt because they can't find an answer to a question. That's my rant. Yes.
Yes, could I pick up a few of those? In terms of the neighbourhood planning groups, the town and parish councils predominantly, yeah, absolutely, they're key consultees, and we're talking with the more active of those groups regularly, not as to how we can work together. And obviously, Farnham is one of those. The databases, yeah, we are conscious that we need to keep those refreshed, and the local plan executive working group has asked for a copy of our database of general consultee bodies to make sure that there's any that they're aware of can be added onto that. And Chair, if other members wish to see that, I don't think there's an issue, because it's not individuals, it's groups. Reaching out and doing it properly, yes, I talked about digital engagement. That's going to be a sort of mainstay of what we do, but there's no substitute at key stages when we have a draft document or we have some options to consult on. We will have to get out there and engage with people. The executive is very, very keen that we look at how we do engage young people, because they're going to benefit from this plan for a lot longer than many others in the community. So we are looking at how we can do that more effectively. But and I'm very grateful for your comments about members being involved in that, because obviously you do know your patches exceptionally well. And in terms of the right questions, I think my personal view is that commonplace is helpful in engaging people in discussions and giving a flavour as to whether something is right or is favoured or not, or what the priorities should be around the vision. But yes, at certain stages there has to be an opportunity for people to provide more substantive answers. So I think it's going to be a mix of techniques. It's going to be a mix of questions that we ask at different times. And the beauty of commonplace is that somebody could answer it on their phone on the bus, assuming there is a bus for them to get on. But that will be part of the mix.
Right, has anybody else got any other comments on the SCI? Again, we'll keep an eye on it, as you say, if it's going to be changing, and make sure. But it'll be interesting to see how, well, I suppose how much we can tell the people out there, you know, that they should be getting involved, because it would be great to have, you know, really good support from the public, and obviously from the businesses and everybody else too, because it's nothing worse than a consultation with next to nobody bothering to be involved. So any other comments that anyone wishes to make? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Quite a minor thing, I guess, but with relation to amendments to planning applications, and when new plans are uploaded to the portal, I have myself sort of struggled sometimes to identify what amendments have been made. And I think that it's probably common amongst, so I mean, sometimes it's quite obvious, other times you're scrutinising the new plans and you can't really see what's changed. So I know this would take extra resource, but whether when amendments are made that officers have accepted, whether some sort of supporting statement can also be uploaded, so that particularly people that have already made comments on the first application know what's changed and can add further comment to that.
I'll have a look at that. I think the better way of doing it is if we're re-notifying, we actually identify the re-notification, what the amendments are.
Okay.
But leave that with me. I'll see what I can achieve.
Okay.
Yes, I think residents do get very frustrated when there's two, you know, the number of applications on the same site keeps coming in, especially when somebody comes in, as they did in Dockenfield, for 12 different applications on the same site. And each one, of course, needed a separate comment, whether it was for or against, you know. Whereas, you know, we know that they've got the resources, the developers, to put in the 12 applications. But, you know, residents really and truly don't honestly have the same will, the same strength of mind to want to write 12. So it is an issue. And I think anything we can do to make everything sort of there and available for people as easy as possible, so that they feel part of the process.
I'll take that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that, you know, whether we can improve that. It would be great. But we can't change developers, unfortunately. I mean, they'll do whatever it is that gives them the greatest chance of success. And as I say, they've got the deepest pockets. So, Andrew, is there anything else you'd like to say before we move on to the NPPF? I'll get my trumpet out.
Thank you.
Give us a fanfare. Right. So, if nobody else wishes to speak, can we move on to the item number 10, which was July 11? which was, I asked Andy if, as he was going to be here, he could give us just a verbal update, or if we could ask him questions about how the revised NPPF affects what we're doing in Waverley in terms of planning decisions now. And I noticed the inspectorate, right from December the 20th, was, using the NPPF changes 2023. And so if you could tell us anything, or if anybody has any questions for Andrew, how this, well, I'll ask you the question. How does it affect the local plan? Basically, does it? And how does it?
Okay. Yeah. I've got a few slides which I could show, or shall I just pick out a few key points? Given the time.
No slides.
Okay. Just find. Okay. Beginning of my slides. Right. Okay. So we had a revised NPPF in December, just before Christmas. It includes some of the changes that the government had been promising to the document. It didn't include some others, and I think we'll see further changes being made over the course of this year, and then we'll, in all likelihood, have regulations which will implement other changes. So I've taken the written ministerial statement. We sent the links around to members, so hopefully you've had a chance to sort of dip into those. I think the written ministerial statement is probably a good starting point because it explains in the government's own words why it's done certain things. And the bullet points here, I've just sort of taken apart a paragraph introducing the written ministerial statement. And this is in the government's own words what they think the NPPF does. The first one is flexibility around housing needs, then issues around greenbelt boundaries, densities, 5-year housing and supply. I won't go through them, but I've got a few slides that I'll pick out some of the main points. First of all, on the housing need, the NPPF now talks about the objective being to meet as much of an area's identified housing need as possible. And although we're stuck with the standard method, which many of you will be familiar with, it gives Waverley a very high number of over 700 houses a year. It's very clear that this is an advisory starting point. That doesn't actually change the position. It always has been an advisory starting point, but the general context of the way the government's describing it is very clearly saying to local authorities, be ambitious, try to meet as much of the need as you can. But if there are constraints, which can be environmental or policy constraints or infrastructure constraints, that can be set out in your plan, and you can justify a lower number. So this is very much setting the context for the work we're doing on the local plan. In terms of Greenbelt, and where they're talking about a Greenbelt lock, this is a change that has caused a lot of comment, and it's caused some authorities to stop doing their local plans or to try and backtrack on plans that they've got going through the system that were allocating Greenbelt sites. So what the government has actually said is that there isn't a requirement for you to review or change boundaries when you're doing a plan, but you may still do that if there are exceptional circumstances that you can justify through the plan making process. So that's going to be one for Waverley to give very careful consideration to, because clearly the Greenbelt constraint will limit how much new development the borough can accommodate, but equally a complete embargo on looking at boundaries would limit the ability of the borough to meet some of those local needs in some of your settlements. So that is a matter that you're going to have to think carefully about. There's stuff in there around density, which I think could potentially be helpful in a development management context, but clearly, if given the constraints within the countryside of Waverley, the focus of the plan is going to be very much about making the best use of land within the urban areas. This is simply saying that in some cases, you ought to be resisting inappropriate development if it's wholly out of character. And I think that's something the council will have been doing or trying to do over many years, and this just gives a bit more strength. The key thing is that they've added in the final version that you need to be setting out circumstances through an authority-wide design code, and the council will be producing design codes for the area, and we've got a piece of work going on with consultants to advise how best to tackle that. But that's the caveat. We can't, without a design code, we can't just have a blanket approach to saying we don't want densification. And I'd certainly suggest that that's not what the council would want to do anyway, because you need to accommodate homes and employment sites, etc., within the urban areas. As a sort of silly change in my view, there's a lot of emphasis about mansard roof extensions. I'm not entirely sure where that's coming from. I don't think that that's going to have a huge impact within Waverley, because the main opportunities for that sort of development are likely to be in the town centres, which are all covered by conservation areas, which will give you a high degree of control. I'm sure Claire can come in with any other information she's gleaned about how that might impact. 5-year supply, the big incentive to produce plans, and it's one of the main reasons why the council is trying to update its plan as quickly as possible, is that if you've got an up-to-date plan, and the NPPF now says that's where it's less than 5 years old, and it had a 5-year housing land supply when it was examined. If you've got that, you won't have to constantly maintain a 5-year housing land supply. So that's the big prize on offer. It doesn't apply to Waverley at the moment. That's why we need a plan as quickly as possible. The other change is a helpful one. At the moment, or prior to this, we've had to add a 5% buffer for flexibility and market choice. So you've got to provide extra sites compared to even the standard method numbers. So that's gone. And we also don't have to apply a 20% buffer, because the council is actually doing pretty well against the housing delivery test, which measures performance against housing requirements over a 3-year period. The threshold is 85%. I think we're actually at 115% on the last test, but Catherine will correct me if that's wrong, but it's certainly she's going to correct me now. Tell me.
139%.
Even better. So the council's doing very well in terms of housing delivery at the moment. The problem is that we, even taking away those buffers, we don't have a 5-year supply going forward, and that's because of the pipeline of sites to deliver future needs, albeit we're building at a high rate at the moment, highest on record. This one about unmet housing need, I'll skip over, because it really just applies to the 20 biggest urban areas in the country, which the government has helpfully given them. The standard method gives them a 35% uplift, because those are supposed to be the most sustainable places. But it's now saying that they've got to meet it all within their patch, unless they've got a formal agreement with the joining authorities. But we don't abut one of those areas. This is the one, Chairman, Chair, that you mentioned, I think alluded to earlier. Paragraph 14, relating to neighbourhood plans made within, it used to be the past 2 years. It's now been extended to the last 5 years. And this comes into play because the council doesn't have a 5-year supply. You may have heard of the tilted balance, which comes into play, particularly at appeals. What the government is now saying is that in weighing up the adverse impacts as part of that balance, and I've quoted the words there, the adverse impact of granting planning permission is likely to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits where there's a conflict with a neighbourhood plan. And to qualify for that, the plan has to be less than 5 years old at the time of the decision, and it needs to allocate at least one housing site. So in the Waverley context, that would apply to Farnham, Chiddingfold, Bramley, and hopefully very soon Cranley and Elsted and Webburn, because they've got their referendums taking place at the end of February, and all being well, those plans could soon be made. It doesn't apply to, unfortunately, to our other neighbourhood plans because they didn't actually allocate housing sites, so they don't tick that box. So this is going to be helpful. It's part of the weighing up of the balance, and it gives enhanced weight to neighbourhood plans, and the government has promoted that as a way of trying to reward those areas for getting on and producing neighbourhood plans. Sorry, going the wrong way. There's some interesting stuff around community-led housing schemes, which there was previous reference or previous policy to entry-level exception schemes, and in many areas of the country, probably not so much in Waverley because it doesn't apply within Greenbelt and AONB, but that was a loophole for market schemes to be promoted. That's been changed, so it now refers to community-led housing, and I've given a bit of the definition there, and it's something that I think we need to understand better what opportunities that offers within Waverley, because I suspect there'd be less resistance to releasing housing sites if they were genuinely community-led and were meeting identified local needs. And then I think I'm nearly at the end. There's a bit more in here about beauty and placemaking, and the emphasis is very much around design codes, which I've mentioned, and one in terms of development management, emphasising the need for accurate plans and agreed materials, etc., to ensure that quality is not diluted further down the line when the scheme is implemented. And then the last two changes I've picked out. There's reference in there around the weight to be given to support energy efficiency, low carbon heating improvements, and I know Sophie within Sarah's team is looking at a note about impacts on historic environments and buildings. And then the last one, there's a new footnote which emphasises the importance of looking at the availability of agricultural land alongside other policies. And I think that emerged through parliamentary discussion about solar farms, etc., using up extensive swathes of agricultural land. So that's just in the mix. So, sorry, I'll stop sharing. So that was a very, very quick gallop through, and I'll stop for breath. And if you've got any questions, sure, Claire and I will try to answer them.
Yeah, it's very, very helpful. You've silenced me. Anybody got any questions for Andrew? Very interesting to see how it works. Councillor Hyman, you put your name down to speak on this item. Have you got a question for Andrew?
Yes, well, I thought I might have an answer in relation to the issue of mansard roofs, because I have read, it's in public domain, that our Chancellor has just recently obtained a planning permission for a mansard roof. So only connection that I can see with anything that going on at all there, that might be something to do with it. And we can all enjoy the same thing now, it appears, which is jolly nice. As far as the changes to it, I think Andrew's quite right in almost all respects there, and it doesn't really make much difference to us. Most importantly to me, paragraph 182 becomes 188, and that's the presumption doesn't apply. Footnote 61 becomes footnote 65. Got a load of new numbers to remember. That's the statutory obligations in respect of biodiversity. There isn't a great deal in there, other than it's just to placate some of the southeastern areas, I think, who have been particularly hurt by the plan as it was before. So going into elections, it's nice for us, but how long we can enjoy having some slightly relaxed rules, I don't know. I think we do have to get serious about the protections that we've got and put them in place for our residents. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. Anybody? Yes, Councillor White, you wish to speak?
So my hand's not working, so I'll have to do this.
Yeah. Use the other one.
Farnham, obviously we are very happy, or at least we feel a little bit happier now with paragraph 14. And it's great news to hear. And thank you, Catherine, for those fabulous words, 139% current housing supply. So that is good news. As you know, in Farnham, we've been battered over the last 6 months to a year. So we are reeling from things and looking at Waverley Lane at the moment. All this is spurring us on to get us through some of these problems. Andrew, I don't want to hijack this, but I just want to ask you, I've heard a comment that under neighbourhood plan, strategic site classification, previously neighbourhood plans could go up to 100 properties in terms of allocation. I gather there's consideration that that might be reduced, which would perhaps feel a bit of a negative for Farnham, but I just wondered whether you could comment on that.
It's certainly something that we're looking at. We've got to agree with the neighbourhood planning groups what the appropriate way of dealing with site allocations will be, because what's essential is that our plan at the point it's adopted can show a deliverable supply of sites for the first 5 years and broad locations or sites for years 6 to 11. So we need to be we need to give certainty around that supply, and that's been the problem thus far, and that's why we don't have a 5-year supply. And I just caveat what you said. I mean, the figure that Catherine gave you was in relation to the housing delivery test, so that's that box ticked. But we don't have a 5-year supply, and we're still some way off it. And we had an appeal decision just this week where the inspector was again whittling away at some of our identified sites. So that is an ongoing problem. That's not going away, but the Para 14 issue is certainly going to strengthen the council's hand. It's not going to mean that the local plan or neighbourhood plans will always prevail, but it just strengthens the position in arguing the balance.
Would you anticipate then the strategic site quantities may vary from council to from town council, parish council to town council? So
yeah, yes. That may well be the case, and in fact, I was just drafting a letter to the parishes this afternoon to put some options to them, because we need this dialogue. The neighbourhood plans have played a really important part in bringing forward site allocations, but the issue is that not all the towns and parish councils want to do that. Some of them would prefer the local plan to do the heavy lifting on sites, and those that do want to do it, there is an issue about the time lag. If they have to wait on certainty as to what the housing number is through the local plan and then start identifying the sites, that's a time lag, and that leaves the borough still vulnerable to not having a 5-year supply of deliverable sites at the point it adopts the local plan.
Okay, well, I mean, I can assure you that Farnham will be on the ball, and we are already progressing. So we want to work very closely on this to get a quick result. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions from any member of the committee? No? Thank you, Andrew. That was more than I was expecting, and I'm very grateful for your time and for putting that together. It's good to just try and get the focus on what the changes are. You know, some of us, as I say, went through the track change version and had a look and celebrated the bits we like, but it's you know, it's something, it will affect what we do, and it's important that we do understand these subtle changes. So thank you very much indeed. And I don't think there's any other business unless anyone has anything they wish to say. So can I again thank all the officers for your patience and your helpful contributions to that. I've learned an awful lot. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to also him, obviously, and Jake for harking the meeting. And I wish everyone a safe journey home. Let's hope the winds abate.